Well, hello out there and welcome to Fintech Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Managing Director, Cornerstone Advisors, Sam Kilmer, joined by my co-host with the most, guest co-host, Mary Wisniewski, also of Cornerstone Advisors. And we are here bringing you some thoughts from the community of fintech, directly from the halls, or in this case, from the window panes of the fintech and banking industries. And Mary and I are truly delighted to be joined by three rock star guests today, straight from the elbow twisting halls of fintech. I believe some of them might actually be in the hallways, although I think Joe does not look to be in a hallway right now. He looks to be comfy in a residence end or something of that nature. We'll talk about that later. But let me introduce our guests that we have for you today. First of all, Parilee Wang, who's the Chief Product Officer of Alloy. Welcome, Parilee.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Also, ICBA Chief Innovation Officer, and I believe I'm going to get all these titles right. A GP at BankTech Ventures, Charles Potts. Welcome, Charles.
Well, thank you, Sam. Mary, I appreciate you guys having me on the hustle today. Thank you.
You bet. You betcha. And then last but certainly not least, Q2 Solutions Consultant, I believe also former SunTrust Treasury exec, Joe Cody. Welcome to the hustle, Joe.
It is an honor to be on the Fintech Hustle. So thank you for having me.
You bet. And as I said, Mary, many of you may recall Mary not only from the stages of Money 2020 and Fintech Meetup and various events, but also from her work for many years with American Banker, where I first had the honor of getting to work with Mary. So I'm looking forward to getting some insights from all these really smart people. And one of the things I like to do when we get rolling is just talk a little bit about, I think most people think that maybe their typical day in fintech is not that interesting to other people, but I actually find that people find it kind of interesting to kind of break down the day of people. So tell us a little bit about the day in the life of Parilee Wang. Parilee, what's your day look like in fintech?
Sure. Well, I think one of the truisms of product is that there's no 2 days that ever look alike in a product role. And I would actually imagine that's true for most fintech roles. So, I have days where I am in person with our clients, learning about their problems, solving them with them, figuring out how we continue to improve the products. Those are probably my favorite days. Days where we're kind of heads down. I live in Utah, but I'm in New York this week with a lot of the product and engineering team, looking ahead to next year, doing a full day workshop on our strategy and how we're going to continue to solve and innovate. I think the thing that I think is really true and why I love my job and I love what I do is that every day has new problems. And I get to work with really awesome people who are focused on solving those problems together. So that might not mean there's a typical day, but it definitely means that it's fun because you're rolling your sleeves up, figuring out what you're going to do about something new and challenging. And it's never exactly alike or the same 2 days in a row.
Yeah, no, ain't that the truth?
I like that.
And Joe, what about a day in the life of Joe Cody over at Q2? What's it look like?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. And I think probably like Parilee, that I would agree, there's very little that is the same from day to day. But the things that I enjoy are really sort of echo what she said. I think probably a lot of us in the industry are for this reason. We enjoy problem solving, right? I'm in Dallas today, as you pointed out, in a hotel room. But I'm going to go to dinner tonight with a client. We're going to have a good dinner. And then tomorrow I'm going to spend the day with them, sort of walking through what I would call the good, the bad, and not necessarily the ugly, but the opportunities for greatness, the good, the bad, and the opportunities for greatness, right? Where, and really where I enjoy the most is in those opportunities for greatness, right? They've got a problem with a customer doing this, that, or the other thing, and figuring out ways to go back and work with our product teams to try and solve those problems. I spend probably 60% of my life on net new sales deals and 40, somewhere in those ranges, 40% with existing customers. And I'll never admit this inside of Q2, but I actually enjoy working with our existing customers the most. So we'll have to ban everyone from Q2 for listening to this, but I really enjoy that, right? Because they had, what I really enjoy about the job is that ability to work with a customer and work through that, what I call an opportunity for greatness, right?
Well, we can't ban everybody from Q2 from watching this, nor would I ever encourage that. However, we can figure out some kind of an AI technique that kind of cattle prods them if they rat you out back channel or something, Joe. I mean, I'll see if I can work on something there with the folks in R&D. But so I see an ATL hat on my friend Charles over there. Are you hanging in the ATL today, my friend? What's a day in your life look like?
A-town down. Look, to echo what both Joe and Parilee have said, I think the most enjoyable aspect of my day-to-day job is problem solving. I and our team sit at this interesting intersection between the community banks that we advocate for, that we help educate, and the fintech companies, the early stage, growth stage, even some of the mature companies that have been around forever. And we sit at this interesting intersection with the innovation arm of ICBA, trying to help really address these common problems. How do we understand what our banks are challenged by, and how do we find solutions and providers that can help address those challenges? And every day, look, we're faced with probably one of the most dynamic community banking industries I've ever seen in my 40 plus years. Yes, to a large extent, it's regulatory pressure and stuff coming out of DC and all of that kind of normal stuff that we do day in and day out. But also the massive explosion in technology over the last dozen plus years, for the first time in my career, has allowed banks of all sizes to have their own best of class, best of breed, kind of a bespoke solution to address the communities that they serve. And this is probably the most enjoyable aspect of what I get to do, is putting together my banking experience, my entrepreneurial experience, and really try to make sense out of that. And so my job every day is really kind of curating this narrative and this story and working across our organization to help facilitate this opportunity. And laughingly, and Sam, you've known me a long time, I also get to go out and speak to our bankers and meet with our bankers at their state events, at their conferences and conventions. I sometimes joke that my title should be chief evangelist instead of chief innovation officer, because there's so much good stuff happening. There's so many amazing stories and successes out there. And if we can just keep shining the light on what they're doing and show the way forward for our community banks, we're going to continue to help this industry that is, frankly, the engine behind job growth and job creation in this country. And I'm incredibly proud to be part of that opportunity out there, and hanging out with you guys and Sam and Mary. We get a chance to see each other in a lot of different places around the country, and it's a pretty amazing place to be right now. And it all happens here in the ATL, right? Atlanta influences everything. We like to say, if you want to bring innovation to community banks, the front door is right here in the ATL.
Always representing. I like that. And I agree with you too, Charles, that one of the fun things about the fintech space, and I think maybe when I first started, and full disclosure, unlike almost any guest that I think we've ever had on Fintech Hustle before, Charles and I actually knew each other and worked with each other when I was a banker, and I think you were at IPS Sendero at the time. Mm-hmm. You mentioned being an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
that's when we met. That was in the 90s. And I don't remember there being as close of a connection between, let's just call it banking and commerce, meaning it was always there.
Right.
Like, obviously you need to be able to process, there's merchant, you need to have a commercial loan. All of those things were true. But I mean more of a real-time connection, or almost like process integration, and just like the worlds colliding of what was historically banking and financial services and what was commerce, or sort of the revenue line of a given company, or anything of that nature. It's been one of the fun things about fintech is, and I just sort of following on, Joe, your point, about the good, the bad, and the, what'd you call it? Not the ugly, but the
Opportunities for greatness. Yeah.
opportunities for greatness. I like that. So let's just follow that. And since I'm a jaded consultant, I can go down the negative path and start with ugly. Oh no, wait, no, that's not. No, the bad. I'll start with the bad because we got rid of the ugly, didn't we? So I'll start with the bad.
This is just a podcast, right? There's no video. There's no video here, is there, Sam? This is
no. This is all going to be amongst us kids.
I have a face for radio, Sam.
Yeah, right. Well, okay. Well, the good news is after it's on video for a period of time, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, we immediately go to audio only, which basically it's basically brand reputation, risk reduction, and mitigation for many of us, Charles.
That, but also we always have the video, Charles. Just know that.
More of a
know that now that we're already in
that was a Mary.
Yeah. But I mean, if you just focus in for a minute on the bad, just for sake of keeping things real and provocative, I'm curious to get you guys' take on something that you guys think is either bad or broken or a problem in the business right now. You know, Charles, you mentioned being an entrepreneur. One of the things when we're advising entrepreneurs is always like, if they're not being just crystal clear about a really, material problem to fix, and if they just sort of jump into pitch mode on products or features, it's just sort of like the soul is lost.
Yeah.
I'm curious when you all think about just problems that are glaring out in the business that still need to be solved, what's one of them that comes to mind for you that either you're passionate about or you think somebody had to be passionate about? And I'm wide open. I don't know, Parilee, I don't know if you have anything in there. Do you want to jump in?
I'm happy to go. I think for a long time, and probably still, I would have said like the problem that I fall asleep thinking about, wake up thinking about is really how the fraud landscape is evolving. But I will say over the last couple quarters, a problem that I've been really spending a lot of time on is how do we keep the pace of innovation, which means nurturing a really vibrant fintech ecosystem, and do that in ways that are compliant and don't get all the banks in trouble. And having come out of a background of working in product at fintechs, always having partner banks that we were collaborating with, I've seen a lot of the kind of fintech side of it, which at times was really just looking for somebody to say, yeah, go do whatever you want. But really, a lot of that partnership and collaboration's there for a reason, right? It's there because things can go horribly wrong, and wrong for the customers that you're there to innovate for, people that you're trying to create great products for in the first place, when you aren't thinking about how what you do plays into the broader ecosystem. And that's not me saying I think every regulation is perfect or anything along those lines. But there's a soul behind a lot of it that is about consumer protection. And that's something that can get lost when you don't have really healthy collaboration between the banks that are unlocking the financial ecosystem and providing a lot of supervision, and the fintechs that are innovating, pushing the edge, trying new things. So I'd say, my product bent is always like, in great problems are great opportunity, or opportunities for greatness, to use our phrase of the day, that I'm totally taking back to my team. But I see that as like one of the kind of in the moment opportunities for greatness, because innovation is critical. We want that pace to continue. It's good for consumers. It's good for businesses done right. So how do we make sure it's done right is a very top of mind thing.
Parilee, I couldn't agree more. There's a word that runs through this thinking that we often lean into, and that's responsible. It's responsible innovation. It's responsible regulation. It's responsible behavior. That intersection is critically important to make sure that what is being created, what is being used, how it's being used are done in a very responsible manner, and that all parties have a conjoined interest in making sure that the outcomes are advantageous to everybody that's part of a safe and sound banking system.
Yeah, and Mary, I know you've been spending a lot of time both in the interviews on your own podcast Money Isn't Everything, by the way. Shameless plug by Sam Kilmer for Money Isn't Everything. You've been talking with a lot of entrepreneurs, and what I would just call sometimes the what do we call it? Not enabling fintech for bankers, but let's just call it straight up challenger disruptor fintech. And it seems like, to your point about responsible, Charles, it seems like that just given all of the disruption of the disruptors, maybe would be one way to put it, is just the challenges with some of the folks that have been startups. I mean, I really hesitate to name names. I'm not trying to go too ugly, but just like there's been a lot of kind of reckoning going on in fintech land and in the kind of non-enabling or the challenging side of things. Anything that comes to mind to you, Mary, or any patterns that you're seeing amongst some of the fintech companies out there about their either heightened awareness or heightened vulnerability, or trying to be at least be perceived to be maybe more responsible or part of the mainstream?
I mean, there's a lot of ways to think about that, but I've been thinking about this broader question of like, how is a consumer to decide, is this fintech app safe? Because I think what we saw this year, of course, is that it's very hard to tell. There's a lot of nuance there. So it's like the fintech has created something that in theory is supposed to improve someone's financial outcome. And then the reality, the money is stuck. So it's the opposite of improving a financial outcome. And so I think this has opened up a lot of doors of like how to think about this. And so, of course, the fintechs that have had these direct, issues top of mind, but there's definitely a ripple effect here. And so, I mean, I think it's one of the biggest dramas in fintech this year of like, are we actually creating something good? How do we improve our partnerships with banks? And the only thing that I think is good is that I'm hearing more and more about how like fintechs are wanting to have more deeper conversations with their banks partners. So they have, everyone's on the same playing field, or at least knows what's going on. So I think that's one good thing. But I think there are a lot of questions still of like, we're all trying to solve a problem, but sometimes we're creating new ones as we do so. And I think that's a big reckoning.
Mary, this is Joe. Real quick, a question around that. Don't you think that some of the changes are coming from the way the markets have started judging all fintechs, right? Every one of us on this call, every fintech out there in the marketplace, before it was just adding another user, and every other user you added made positive for you, and that would increase your value, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of what's happening in the shakeout of the world is that we're having to do profitable growth. Everybody is, right? And it's all about cash flow.
Speak for yourselves. Money isn't
you
everything.
mean I just can't burn all that venture capital money like it's yeah, exactly.
Like it's going out of style. Yeah. But I think that's part of what we're seeing in the fintech industry, right? Is a little bit of rationalization around it to some degree. And
totally
Parilee, I'd go back to one thing you said, and I wanted to just throw this out to the group. You talked about security. You never said it didn't scare you anymore, right? I don't want to quote. I'm not trying to put those words in your mouth, but you said you've sort of moved on to not worry about, but keep you up at night over other things. One thing I've seen, at least this is from my perspective, and I'd love to hear you guys' opinion. We as an industry, the fintech industry, I'm not talking about any individual vendor, we have done a much better job of protecting our consumers and our business customers in the last 5 years. That's not to say we don't have fraud and we don't have account takeovers and all those things we do, but it is nothing like it was in 2018, 2019, and 2020. I think we as an industry, I think we should pat ourselves on the back is where I'm headed with this, over what we've done around fraud and just begin to do a better job of preventing that than we did in the 2015 to 2019 time period.
I agree, Joe, and at the same time, it's only going to get more complicated and complex, and the costs are going to continue to rise. It is. I equate it to what the card brands and card processors have had to do over the last couple of decades when it comes to fraud, and that is continue to add layers. As the law of large numbers catches up, it's about taking out a basis point here or there. And the same thing when it comes to fraud and risk mitigation in financial institutions. We're just going to have to continue adding layers of oversight as the fraudsters get more sophisticated, get broader and deeper. It gets more complicated. The technology, becomes more ubiquitous. And so it is one of those areas where I know for community banks, for example, they have to lean harder into their trusted advisors, their trusted suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
It is a level of expertise that just continues to get more expansive and robust, and it's never going to be less problematic than it is today.
Well, and for all the promise of, you know, you hopefully hear more and more use cases every day for AI as opposed to just sort of AI tech chasing a problem. I'm seeing at least some more use cases, but you just know that
I
the
don't want to get
criminals
hung
are
up
use casing
on
the
that.
crap out of this, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't want to get hung up on AI.
Yeah, so I think on the one hand, I'm hearing a lot more fraud detection efforts going on successfully, but it doesn't tell me that that the inbound threat vectors are lessening. And in fact,
they're not.
I was also thinking about, and just talking with a couple of senior bank leaders over the last couple of weeks about this, is that while they might feel a little bit better about some frauds that they're able to mitigate, there's some new ones that they're running into. Of course, there's always going to be new ones, but then there's also just this whole growth in scams that are freaking out all their clients. Mm-hmm. And so even if they get
who thought in 2024 who had check washing on your bingo card?
Yeah. Right? Yeah. It better be there. It better get there if it's not there. Yeah.
Yeah. Or that on TikTok.
Frank Abagnale is doing more business now than he did when the movie came.
But the thing that that I think is both amazing, but also hard for a lot of the banks, fintechs that I talk to every day, is there is an amazing kind of wash of innovation coming out of fintech companies with solutions to all of the new nuanced aspects of fraud. And that is both incredible and overwhelming, right? Folks are sitting there looking at, okay, a few years ago, I could pick from a menu that I could, list on one sheet of paper, and you were kind of assembling your solution. I think it would, take you a phone book today to articulate all the different options that are out there. And the answer isn't, oh, I just haven't found my silver bullet yet. The answer is you actually need the cocktail. You're going to need the mix of all of the different aspects in order to get ahead of the fraudsters, because the minute you've got one vulnerability, there's a new vulnerability in the mix. And what that really creates a need for, I think, is folks that can help navigate the noise and help you find your way to those right solutions in that, I think, Charles, you were saying, like, that trusted advisor kind of capacity. That's an opportunity for software and products. That's an opportunity for people. But there's, making sense from the noise. The noise is powerful, but it's overwhelming if you don't have that help.
Hey, Joe, I never asked you. I didn't get a chance to ask you yet. On the bad, what's something you think might be broken in the industry right now that you think could use a fixing, or pick your metaphor? Challenge, problem needing a solution, challenge needing to be overcome. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of go back to security, right? I know we've been talking about that, but and I'm going to lead with that, but understand we are doing a better job than we ever have. I'm talking about in the fintech world, and to everything everybody said, we continue to get new scams. We continue to get all this. I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to have to continue, sort of to Charles's line of thinking. It's not going to be cheap. It's going to be expensive. It's going to require investment from the entire industry. I'm talking about from the financial institutions, from the fintech side, and probably at some point, some government regulation, as much as I hate to even say those words out loud. But when I look at, I don't want to name any vendors, but I read stats online about some of the instant money movers, right? And the amount of fraud increase that they're seeing on those. That pains my soul, right? Because when there's a fraud like that, it hurts all of us, right? It doesn't matter. Nobody wants to hear that it was some little side vendor who did something stupid or whatever, or hasn't done something smart. It hurts everybody in this space because it kills trust and it kills confidence in the system. And so at the end of the day, security is where if we can't make this stuff secure and we can't make people feel comfortable, it's a continual battle that we got to continue to invest in to keep that alive.
Well, look, I'm part of where I sit is in an organization that is heavily focused on making sure we do things, continue to support a safe and sound, financially stable system here in the United States. And part of that, to your point, Joe, is making sure that we continue to highlight best practices around these kind of security and fraud mitigation. And some of it is going to necessarily lead to probably things like syndicated services that can address kind of the bigger, the bigger picture. You take a typical community bank, and we kind of started inside the bank and started moving greater and greater outwardly, and now we're into kind of nation state actors, and that's just going to necessitate something more than just another fintech solution. I mean, this is a big problem for our industry and our economy and our country, and to ensure that our banking system is continues to be the best banking system on the planet. I think we're going to have to think about cybersecurity and fraud in different ways than we typically have in the last few decades.
I would strongly agree. And I would just add in that I think that the challenge also that we all have to remember is there are some very easy security and fraud solutions. They just all involve cutting off access. Right. And so,
Exactly.
I can build you a no fraud fintech tomorrow. I just won't have any customers.
I'm going to air gap my bank. I'm going to air gap my bank to the outside world.
and so that is really like the dilemma, though. And that's where a lot of the kind of special sauce comes in, is how do you continue to grow, right? We didn't get into business to stop fraud. We got, into business to deliver something that hopefully had real impact on real customers. To do that, you're going to have to take some risk. How do you manage risk and manage growth? And how do you do those both together? That's, when I hear folks talking about it from just one angle or just the other angle, I think they're missing both where the opportunity is and where the challenge is. It's in that balance.
No, and you throw regulatory insight like third and fourth party risk. So now financial institutions are having to think about how do they arm their commercial and business customers, possibly with tools to extend that fence line even out to them. These are things that we just never contemplated when kind of building the modern technology infrastructure that we.
Mary, I think you're gonna make a point there too.
Yeah, the other nuance that comes up is like, I'm just even thinking of the brand's positioning. Like there are challenger bank products that promote like, oh, get your tax refunds, a week early or even more than that. And then people do it. And then you can see the reviews. People are really angry because they're trying to move that money. And because it's a higher amount, it's slowed down. So they signed up for a service to get money quicker, but it's actually slowing them down. So I think it's part of that, setting the fraud at the right level, but also like, is it undermining your whole, proposition too, to lure someone? It's very fascinating from an outsider's perspective, but so very complicated.
Yeah. Well, I maybe turn this around. Let's go to the debit column or the credit column, whichever it would be, and talk a little bit about things that you see that are working well in your daily travels of fintech. Parilee, anything you see going on in the industry right now that you think is either great, admirable, worth pointing out to, or worth building upon?
So I think that, really kind of going back to the note on just how many innovative new solutions there are coming to market, whether that's, new, models coming out of data science companies that are specializing in detecting new forms of risk. I think I see something new every day. As much of a challenge as that is, it's also really a bright spot I anchor on, because I do have a lot of confidence that as long as there's innovation coming to market, and people are able to try it out and test it, we're going to land on the ones that are truly best in class, truly delivering complementary signal, complementary detection. And that's how we're going to balance that, keep the growth, keep the best customer experiences, and, don't create the best experiences for the folks that are trying to steal money, commit scams, or otherwise commit financial crimes. Just the pace of innovation of, like in my world, fraud detection tools that are coming to market is something that really, I see as a bright spot for the future.
Joe, anything you're seeing in your travels that you think is a positive sign for the business or something to be built upon?
Yeah, and it's listen, I'm going to take us back 18 months, right? We had Silicon Valley Bank fail, we had Signature Bank fail, and one of the other big crypto settlement banks failed. And we were all worried about community banking and deposits, right? The flight to safety, all of that. The one thing I have seen in all the FIs I've talked to, whether they're credit unions or banks, is some are doing it much better than others, mind you. But there is a real push on deposits, and it's been successful, right, by and large, amongst the what I would call the non-money center banks, right, the get outside of the top 40 or 50.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys have they knew it was going to be a fight. They have put together programs to go after small business deposits, right, that are typically higher and a little less maintenance than, say, a commercial customer, a high-end commercial customer. And I've just seen, they've in some cases up the amount of money they pay from a ERC, from an earnings rate credit, right? It's really been amazing to me because I think 18 months ago we were all horrified that there was going to be no deposits left for the community bank space. But the community bankers have fought back and have done a really good job. That may not have been exactly what you're looking for because that's old school banking, right? And it's old school banking, but that is absolutely the case. And it's really impressive to see.
What do you think, Charles?
Ditto. Thank you, Joe. That was a great summation of frankly what our community bankers did. And I will say this: the same lesson we learned in 2020 and 21 post COVID, and especially the CARES Act and PPP, is small business America, commercial small businesses realized that the community banks were still the bread and butter and the lifeblood of much of the economic engine driving job creation. Almost 2/3 of small business loans comes from them. That's where jobs are created. And the same thing post SVB is the community bankers were there. They were there. They were solid. They did the right things. They were not part of that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they answered the call for the commercial and business customers and consumers who needed a comfortable and safe place in what was a crazy kind of odd upheaval that still a lot of people can't explain today. And I also will say that we, in our innovation programs, we saw the banks lean heavily into some of those fintechs to help support those initiatives. It was a great call to arms, if you will, for some of the fintechs to come address those deposit retention and acquisition needs that community bankers had. And it was a good proof point of the fact that, as many of you have said, there have been some really good, smart, entrepreneurial new companies come out at the right time and at the right fit for our world, the community bank space.
Yeah, and I know we just got a few minutes left here, and I want to be mindful of you because I know you guys are busy. But Mary, anything you want to add to the conversation about things you see going pretty well in the industry, or things you think we could build on?
Yeah, I think, just to dial up some of these points, I think a question that the industry always asks itself is like, how do I stand out in a commoditized industry? And I think it's getting interesting, some of the experiments that I'm seeing, but just like even like Ally Bank doing a partnership with Calm and also holding these like Zoom drop-ins to like go in the mental health and money mind space. And then, there's I wish I could remember the name of the bank, but it's on the East Coast, Community Bank, and it's making sure its cards are not out of plastic to help the environment. And I just feel like these are such subtle like examples, but it's just showing you like competition is changing, and the way to like stand out a little bit, it's changing from 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny,
I
Mary.
do love-
There are number of banks have been rolling out these eco-friendly plastic, non-plastic plastic. Yeah, there's gosh, I think MasterCard started pushing that a little over a year ago.
I think it's really cool because it's one of those things where, money is going digital, but there's still all this stuff we could change right now that's so bad.
Well, when you start looking at I spend a lot of time talking about bankers about the customer of the future, and the employee of the future has never stepped foot in a branch. Doesn't want and so when you start assessing consumers and what they want, and I actually saw some really good research at a conference last week. I have a 24-year-old daughter, and her friends, when they think about what their banking needs are, kind of rates and that stuff is like third, fourth, or fifth on the list.
Right.
I mean, they're thinking about, is this bank doing social good? Does it meet my kind of core philosophy? Yeah, does it provide me those capabilities? But that stuff is critically important to a lot of consumers going forward. And so,
Charles, I'll just say I have 20-something-year-old kids as well, and they're never setting foot in a branch, just like you described.
No.
But that very mature criteria your daughter uses is not on my kids' list at all. They're like, Dad, what is this check thing? How do I deposit something? And how do I open an account? They have no social redeeming value. I clearly failed as a parent, right? Whereas your daughter seems to have it going on.
As a former banker, Joe, I started from day one. I'm like I tried to train her from day one. But it's really interesting, Joe. When I'm with her, I almost to the point of being an uncomfortable nuisance. I quiz her friends as well. Because it's like, what are you using? I want to know what apps they're using, how they're using it. This is how we stay on top of those trends. Is just ask the customer.
Yeah,
I'm a few years behind you all, but I have an 8-year-old, and he actually asked for a bank account for his last birthday.
Oh, that's awesome!
Wow, that's awesome.
And so I dug into all the world of what can you do with an 8-year-old in the banking ecosystem. And, how do we keep him safe and teach him good financial habits?
Here's some promotion for the ATL, right? Is Greenlight, Tim Sheehan and Johnson Cook. That's about
what we landed on.
Away from me here.
Yeah, that's what we wound up going with.
Yep, that's a great product.
Sorry to drop off of the podcast, everybody. How rude of me, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you warned us. You'd leave if you didn't like it.
Yeah, didn't I? I think I did that. But,
you did.
It's one of those where the broadband in your neighborhood goes down. So this is just chalk another one up for redundancy, right, guys?
There we go.
But well, thanks for joining us on the podcast today, and I'll just go ahead and say from my secondary connection here, thanks for joining everybody on today's episode of Fintech Hustle, and stay safe out there, and we'll see you on the road.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Great chatting.